They say betrayal doesn't always feel like a knife to the back. Sometimes, it feels like silence at the dinner table, like a name skipped in a toast, like a glance that doesn't land where it used to. That's how it started for me. My name is Daniel Tran. I'm 56. I spent most of my life working 2 jobs, paying off a house I didn't live in, and supporting a family that never really saw me as one of their own. For years, I told myself it was enough. That duty mattered more than recognition. That being the dependable older brother, the son who never caused trouble, the uncle who always showed up with gifts, with advice, with money meant something. It did, until the day it didn't. I grew up in a working-class neighborhood outside San Jose. My parents ran a tiny grocery store. Nothing fancy, just enough to scrape by. They barely finished high school, but they had big dreams for us. I was the firstborn. I took care of my siblings while my parents worked 16-hour days. By 15, I was managing inventory in the store. By 18, I was working full-time and sending money home from my side jobs. Then came college, except not for me. There wasn't enough money, they said. So I stayed back, helped the business, let my younger brother Thomas go instead. He wanted to study finance. I told myself it was fine, that I'd go later. That family came first. That was my first lesson in invisible sacrifice. It wouldn't be the last. As years passed, the family business grew. Thomas graduated and got a corporate job. My sister Mai married into a wealthy family and rarely visited anymore. I stayed behind, keeping the store afloat when my parents retired. Even when they signed it over to Thomas for legal purposes, I said nothing. I still remember the meeting. We were sitting at the kitchen table. Mom, Dad, Thomas. I'd just come back from a 14-hour shift. They handed me the papers like it was already decided. Thomas will handle the paperwork, but it's all still family, my mom said. I nodded, because what else could I do? That's what family meant back then. Silent compromise. Then came the house. A modest 2-story home we all grew up in. After our parents moved into a retirement condo, the question came up, who would take the house? Mai didn't want it. Thomas said he'd manage it. And once again, I offered to pay the taxes, handle the repairs, and keep it in the family. I didn't know. They'd already decided to sell it, behind my back. One night, I came home to find a real estate sign on the lawn. Thomas was there, clipboard in hand, walking buyers through the kitchen. When I asked him what the hell was going on, he looked at me like I was overreacting. It's not like you own it, Dan. I stood there. In the same hallway where I once helped him learn to tie a tie. In the house where I'd patched up every damn leak, paid every overdue bill, replaced every broken lock. And he said that. It's not like you own it. That was the moment I realized I wasn't family. I was a utility. A reliable paycheck. A fixer. A backup plan. But never one of them. I moved out that night. No argument, no scene. I packed a single suitcase, left the spare keys on the table, and drove to a motel off the freeway. I didn't cry. I didn't even get angry. I just sat on the edge of the bed and stared at my hands. Rough, calloused, still stained with grease from fixing the sink that morning. I thought about all the things I'd paid for, all the quiet yeses I'd said, all the birthdays I'd missed for overtime. And for what? But here's the thing. When people show you what you are to them, believe them. That night, I opened an old storage bin I hadn't touched in years. Inside were receipts, bank statements, emails, paper trails that traced back every loan, every transfer, every invoice I'd covered in silence. Not out of spite, but because I finally understood. That silence wasn't loyalty. It was complicity. And I was done being complicit. This was just the beginning of a reckoning. Because no one, not Thomas, not Mai, not even my own parents, understood what I was about to do. They had written me off. But I had one thing they didn't expect: proof. And more importantly, clarity. Not anger. Not revenge. Just the quiet realization that the life I'd built for them, I was finally going to rebuild for me. I didn't sleep much that night. The motel room was small, the air stale. But it wasn't the room that kept me awake. It was the weight of understanding. For the first time in over 3 decades, I saw my family without the soft filters I'd used to protect myself. Not as complicated, imperfect people doing their best, but as individuals who saw me as something transactional, Thomas, even Mom and Dad. None of them had ever really asked how I was doing. They just knew I would handle it, and I always did. Until now. The next morning, I drove to a coffee shop on the edge of town. The kind with booths that invite long hours and reflection. I brought my old laptop and a stack of receipts I'd grabbed from the storage unit. I started cataloging. 12 years of bank transfers. Maintenance expenses. School tuition payments for Mai's kids that were supposedly covered by a family scholarship. Utility bills for the house under my name paid monthly without fail. There were emails too, ones where Thomas forwarded me property tax documents with a single line, "Hey, can you take care of this?" No greeting, no thank you. Just expectation. And I did take care of it, every time. By noon, I had 4 folders: house costs, education support, business bailouts, and silent loans. I wasn't building a case to sue them, not yet. I was building a case for myself. Because for so long I'd questioned my own worth, my own sanity. I'd wondered if I was being dramatic. If maybe I owed them something just for being born first. But these files, these facts, they were undeniable. They told the story I'd been too tired to write before. 3 days later, I got a text from Mai. "Hey, heard you moved out. Can you help Thomas with the plumbing issue at the old house? Buyer's inspection flagged something." That was it. No concern. No check-in. Just a request, another task. I stared at the message, and for once I didn't respond. I simply archived it. Let them call a plumber. Let them pay for their own repairs. My time of being their invisible labor had ended. That weekend, I met with an old friend, Judy Lynn, a quiet, meticulous CPA I hadn't seen in years. We used to work nights at the same warehouse in our 20s before she moved on to accounting. She always had a mind for the fine print. I showed her what I'd collected. After reviewing the folders, she leaned back, crossed her arms, and said something that stayed with me. "Dan, this isn't generosity. This is exploitation with paperwork." She told me that legally most of what I'd paid for would be considered gifts unless there was proof of an agreement. But from an ethical standpoint, she said I had more than enough to challenge their narrative. She helped me draft a formal statement of all expenses I'd covered over the years. Not for litigation yet, but so I'd have a timeline. A structure. A map of where all my loyalty had gone. We dated everything. Cross-referenced bank logs, attached scanned receipts. Page after page, I watched my identity shift on paper from the supportive older brother to the unacknowledged financial foundation of the entire family. Then came the estate file. While reviewing tax statements, Judy noticed something odd. There was a record of the family property, not the house, but the store being refinanced just 2 years ago. I had no idea. Turns out Thomas had used the property as collateral for a personal business loan, without informing me. Even though I was still managing the taxes and repairs. Even though I was still paying for inventory shortfalls. He had leveraged family assets, behind my back, for something I never benefited from. I called the bank to confirm. They gave me the documents. Legally, he could do it. Our parents had signed over the property entirely in his name back in 2016. I had trusted them. Trusted him. That trust had cost me the last sliver of illusion I had left. I sat in my car for nearly an hour after leaving the bank. The street was quiet. Kids were playing across the park, their laughter in stark contrast to the cold stillness inside my chest. I thought about every time I'd been told to be patient, to keep the peace, to understand where they were coming from. And I realized no one had ever asked to understand me. The next day, I did something that surprised even myself. I wrote a letter, one single email. Subject line, "Let's clarify where we stand." I sent it to the family group chat. In it, I explained without anger, without guilt, that I would no longer be responsible for any financial support. That I had records of everything I had contributed over the years. That if they needed access to any of the documents, I'd provide them once. And most importantly, that I was no longer interested in preserving a relationship built entirely on my compliance. Mai responded first. "This feels really passive-aggressive, Dan. Why didn't you just talk to us?" I didn't answer. Thomas chimed in later. "If you're trying to guilt trip us, it's not going to work. You never asked for anything. That was your choice." He was right. It had been my choice. A choice made over and over in the name of family. But choices made under guilt and obligation aren't kindness. They're survival. And I had stopped surviving. I was ready to start living. By the end of that week, I'd transferred my savings into a new account. Changed my number. updated my mailing address, cut every financial tie I had to them. I didn't do it out of vengeance. I did it out of necessity, out of grief even, because the family I thought I had never really existed. And pretending any longer would only hurt me more. Silence is heavy, but it's also contagious. After I sent that email, things got quiet, eerily quiet. No calls, no texts, not even a passive-aggressive Facebook post. I'd removed myself from the cycle. And like a machine missing a crucial cog, they didn't know how to function anymore. I didn't feel triumphant. I felt empty. Because when you stop being useful, you find out very quickly whether you were ever truly valued. And I wasn't. 2 weeks passed. I spent them doing things I hadn't allowed myself in years. I took long walks without a purpose. Read books cover to cover without checking my phone. Started journaling just for me. No audience, no obligation. I wrote about the first time I ever lent Thomas money. He was 22, just out of college, had maxed out 2 credit cards. I didn't hesitate, wrote a check for $4,000. Never asked for it back. I wrote about the time my husband got laid off and I covered their rent for 6 months. They sent a fruit basket. No card, no thanks. I remembered all of it now. Not to punish them, but to finally acknowledge myself. Because for too long I had swallowed those memories like bitter pills, telling myself that real love doesn't keep score. But maybe it should, not to assign blame, but to protect what little of yourself you have left. Then came the phone call. It was late, almost midnight, an unknown number. I let it go to voicemail, but the message chilled me. Hi Daniel, this is Helen Nguyen. I'm the attorney handling your father's estate. I need to speak with you urgently regarding some irregularities in the property documents. Estate. What estate? I hadn't been told anything had happened. I hadn't even known he was sick. I called back immediately. Helen sounded young but composed. She explained that my father had passed away earlier that week. Mai and Thomas had begun handling the legal transfer of assets, but during the process she found a sealed envelope addressed to me. Your name wasn't on any of the new ownership documents, she said carefully. But this letter, he left it only for you. She asked if I wanted to come in and collect it. I said yes. Then I hung up and just sat there. No one had called. No one had told me he died. No funeral invitation, no obituary. They'd buried him without me. 2 days later, I walked into Helen's office. She handed me the letter and stepped out, giving me privacy. The envelope was old, yellowed, folded once in the center. My name written in my father's familiar blocky handwriting. Inside was a single page. Daniel, if you're reading this, I'm gone. I don't know if I deserve your forgiveness, but I need you to know something. I always knew what you gave up, what you sacrificed, what you held in silence for this family. And I let it happen. Because it was easier to lean on the one who never said no. And for that, I failed you. Thomas was never strong enough. Mai always wanted out. You were the backbone, and I never told you that. But I've made arrangements. One thing, I still had control over the store. It's yours now, not legally through them, but through this letter. Helen has the supporting documents. If you want it, claim it. If you don't, I understand. I'm sorry, son. Dad. I stared at the paper until the words blurred. Not because of tears, because of rage. Grief. All tangled together. He had known. All these years he had seen me and said nothing. Let them treat me like a workhorse. Let them erase me. Even now, it was too little too late. But it was also something. And I wasn't used to something. I stepped out of the office and told Helen I wanted to move forward. She handed me a notarized deed transfer backdated to 6 months before his death. He had made sure it would be airtight, unchallengeable. I thanked her, not because I felt grateful, but because she had treated me like a person, not a liability. The next morning, I visited the store. It was still operating, still under the name Tran Family Market. But everything felt different. The cashier was someone I didn't recognize. The back room where I'd once done inventory in the summers was now a storage unit for bulk items. Efficient, sterile, unfamiliar. But then I saw it, a photo still hanging by the register. Of my dad, my siblings, and me. From 1998. Before the betrayal. Before everything fell apart. I took it down. Not out of anger, but because I needed to reclaim it. Later that day, I received a text from Thomas. So I guess you went behind our backs too, taking the store. After everything we built together, don't bother coming around anymore. You're not welcome. I stared at the screen for a full minute. Then I replied, You mean the store I funded for years, the one Dad signed over to me quietly because he knew what you'd try to do? I didn't go behind your back. I just stopped standing behind you. He didn't respond. Mai tried calling once. I let it ring. There was nothing left to say. That weekend, I reopened the store under a new name, Quiet Hands Market. It felt right. A tribute to the way I'd lived, to the work done in silence, to the dignity that no one ever acknowledged until now. I hired 2 new employees, paid them well, gave them proper breaks, treated them like people, not tools, because I knew what it was like to be treated otherwise. On the day we reopened, a woman came in with her son. She looked around slowly, eyes softening at the familiar layout. I used to come here when I was a kid, she said. Your father gave me free oranges when we couldn't afford groceries. I nodded. He did that a lot. She smiled. He wasn't perfect, but he tried. And in that moment, something shifted in me. I realized maybe I didn't need to forgive the past to move forward. Maybe honoring what was good didn't mean excusing what hurt. It just meant continuing on my own terms. I thought that once I reclaimed the store, once I stood up and made a choice for myself, it would feel like victory. But what it really felt like was silence. A colder, lonelier silence than I had prepared for. Because people don't just get angry when you stop serving them. They erase you, quickly, without warning. The messages stopped. The family group chat removed me. I heard from an old neighbor that Thomas and Mai had told relatives I manipulated our father during his final days. That I took advantage of the situation. They rewrote the story. It didn't matter that I had years of bank records. Didn't matter that I had stayed when everyone else left. Didn't matter that my father himself had written the truth in black ink on white paper. In their version of the story, I was the villain. And that hurt more than I expected. The store was running. Customers were coming back. The staff was grateful. On the surface, things were good. But every evening when I locked the doors and turned out the lights, I felt like I was standing alone on a bridge that had burned behind me. No way back. No family left. At least not the one I was born into. Then something happened. It was a Thursday afternoon around closing time. A young man came in, skinny, nervous-looking, maybe 19 or 20. He walked slowly down the aisles, avoiding eye contact. When he reached the counter, he placed a small bag of rice and a loaf of bread on the register, then hesitated. Do you have a tab program or something? He asked, eyes low. I get paid next week, but I need to eat tonight. I looked at him. He reminded me of myself 30 years ago. Hungry, proud, trying not to ask, but also trying not to starve. I nodded slowly. I've got something better, I said, and rang it up for 0. His eyes widened. He tried to object, but I raised a hand. Just pay it forward someday, that's all. He smiled then, a small, grateful smile, and walked out the door like a weight had been lifted off his shoulders. That night, I stood behind the counter and thought, this is what real legacy looks like. Not buildings, not deeds, not titles, but dignity. Passed forward in quiet acts of humanity. I didn't need a family name to do that. I just needed to remember who I was before I was defined by someone else's needs. But pain doesn't leave just because you're doing the right thing. It lingers. I found myself replaying old arguments, old silences. The birthday dinners I was excluded from. The way Thomas used to call me boring for never traveling. The way Mai once told me I'd wasted my life working for other people's dreams. It wasn't just about money. It never was. It was about how they made me feel small even when I was the one holding everything together. One night I got a voicemail. It was from Uncle Ben, my father's younger brother. We hadn't spoken in years. Daniel, I heard what happened. I want you to know I saw everything back then. Your father never said much, but he was proud of you. We all were. I'm sorry we didn't say it sooner. If you ever want to talk, you're not alone, son. I sat on the back steps of the store that night and let myself cry. For the first time in years. Not because I was weak, but because I was finally safe enough to feel everything I'd buried. The betrayal, the disappointment, the deep aching grief of being unseen, and the soft, unfamiliar warmth of being told I wasn't invisible. A few days later, I went to visit Uncle Ben. He welcomed me with a firm handshake and a look that said more than words ever could. We spent hours talking about my father, about the store, about our family, and all its flaws. I always thought your dad didn't stand up for you because he didn't care, Ben said, pouring tea. But now, I think he just didn't know how. That landed differently. Because for so long I'd made peace with being unloved. But maybe it wasn't a lack of love, just a failure to express it. And failures don't always mean absence. As spring arrived, the store blossomed too. We launched a weekend market supporting local farmers and vendors. We added a bulletin board where people could post job openings, community events, or just kind notes. It became more than a store. It became a safe place, a soft corner in a hard world. And somehow, piece by piece, that healed me more than any apology ever could. Then came the letter, a formal one, mailed to the store. It stated that Thomas and Mary were really that they believed I had forced our father down the that they intended to contest the ownership of the store. They couldn't be I took the letter straight to Henry and Stacy. She reviewed it calmly and looked up at the resolution. Let them try. This deed is clean. Witnessed, signed, notarized. Your father knew what he was doing. Still, I asked her to prepare a response. Professional, firm, but final. I wanted them to know this chapter was closed. Not because I wanted to punish them, but because I no longer needed to explain myself. On the walk home that evening, I passed by a bakery. In the window was a cake that read, "You don't owe anyone the version of you they created in their head." And I stood there for a full minute just breathing that in. Because that was it, wasn't it? That was what I had been doing all my life, trying to match the version of Daniel that everyone else needed. Reliable, selfless, silent. But that Daniel, he didn't survive. The one who did, he was done shrinking. I still think about my family sometimes. Not with bitterness, but with a kind of distance you feel when remembering a house you used to live in before you realized it had no doors for you. And I know now that being cut off from them wasn't a punishment. It was a beginning. A fire may destroy, but it also clears space for something new. And I was building something new. It had been 6 months since I reclaimed the store. 6 months since I stepped away from the family that raised me, but never truly saw me. In that time, I learned 2 things. First, grief isn't just about losing someone. It's also about accepting that some things were never what you thought they were. And second, peace isn't loud. It's quiet. A deep breath that doesn't catch in your throat anymore. A morning that begins without dread. A name you no longer wait to hear from. One Thursday morning, as I opened up Quiet Hands Market, I noticed a familiar car parked across the street. Thomas. He was leaning on the hood, arms crossed like he'd been rehearsing what to say. We hadn't seen each other since the lawyer's letter. I didn't feel fear. Or rage. Just tired curiosity. I walked over slowly. He turned and tried to smile. It didn't reach his eyes. "Got a minute?" he asked. I nodded, wordlessly, and led him behind the store to the small courtyard I'd built with benches and potted herbs. We sat, and for the first time in years he looked small, not physically, but in presence. Like the weight of his story wasn't holding up anymore. "I was angry," he began. "I still am, to be honest. I don't understand why he chose you." There it was. Not grief, not reflection. Possession. He wasn't mourning our father. He was mourning control. I kept my voice calm. "You don't have to understand it, Thomas. He made his choice. And I made mine." He frowned. "You think this makes you better than us?" "No," I said quietly. "It just makes me done." He blinked. "I don't want to fight anymore," he added. "But Mai's not going to drop it. She thinks you manipulated Dad. She's talking about another legal challenge." I looked him in the eyes. "Then tell her to do what she needs to. But I'm not going back into that courtroom. I have nothing to prove anymore." He looked down, fiddled with his watch. "She thinks you poisoned him against us." I laughed softly. He saw what we all refused to say out loud. That I was the one holding everything together while you two kept your hands clean. There was a long silence. Then Thomas asked something I didn't expect. "Do you hate us?" I looked up at the sky. The clouds were moving slowly, soft shadows over the brick wall. "No," I said after a pause. "I don't hate you, but I don't trust you. And I don't need to be near people who only value me when I'm useful." He nodded almost imperceptibly, then stood. "Well," he said, adjusting his sleeves, "I guess we'll see what happens." I didn't respond. He walked away, didn't turn back. And for the first time, I didn't feel the urge to chase after closure, because I already had it. Weeks passed. The store kept growing. Locals started calling it the quiet shop. Not because it was silent, but because it felt peaceful, intentional, safe. A place where no one was performing for family or walking on old landmines. One afternoon, I got a visit from a woman in her 50s, well-dressed, confident. She introduced herself as Mrs. Lee, a teacher at a local community college. "I heard what you did with this place," she said. "And I was wondering if you'd consider mentoring some of our students' small business interns. They don't come from much, but they've got grit." I smiled. That was the first time someone asked what I could teach, not what I could give away. "Send them by," I said. "We all start somewhere." The first intern showed up 2 weeks later. Her name was Nina, 19, nervous but eager. She reminded me of myself before life taught me to expect nothing. We worked on inventory, supply chain, orders, marketing. And one day, as we were labeling price tags, she asked, "Mr. Tran, were you always this calm?" I laughed. "No," I said. "I used to bend until I broke." She tilted her head. "So what changed?" I looked around the store. "This place," I said, "not the walls, but the choice to build something with intention. Something no one could take away or rewrite." She smiled quietly and went back to work. One evening, months later, I received a small envelope in the mail. No return address. Inside was a photo, an old one. Me, my father, and Thomas on opening day of the original store. Back when I still believed we were one unit. Back before the cracks appeared. On the back of the photo in faded ink was a short message. "You were always the one we leaned on. I just wish we had said it while you were still holding us." No signature, but I didn't need one. I knew it was from I didn't reach out, didn't send anything back, because that was the first time I felt free. Sometimes I walk by old streets, past houses that used to hold family gatherings, past restaurants where we had birthdays, arguments, toasts that never included me. And I don't feel anger. I don't feel nostalgia. I feel distance, the kind that protects, that lets you breathe. That reminds you survived the storm not because you fought back, but because you finally walked away. People ask if I regret cutting them off. And I say no, because I didn't cut them off. I cut the weight of being responsible for everyone's comfort while no one cared about mine. That's not estrangement, that's self-respect. And sometimes I still see Thomas. Once in a while at city events. We nod, nothing more. It's not reconciliation, but it's peace. The quiet kind. Where no one owes anyone anything. Where stories don't need to be retold. Because the truth already stands. Today I lock up the store each night with steady hands. Not rushed, not worn down, just present. I sit in the back courtyard with a warm drink, listen to the night traffic fade. And I think, this isn't the life I was handed. It's the one I chose. And finally, that's enough.